What's up, everyone? If this is your first time watching my channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Normally, I don't do story time videos. I focus more on finances, but I will do one every once in a while. And this is a story that I wanted to tell you guys last year, but I had a lot of stuff happen around Halloween time, and I just didn't get around to it. So I had to wait a year to post this. So, this is actually 3 or maybe 4 stories put together, and this is my experience with ghosts. Now, if you tuned in because I said the house is haunted in the title or in the thumbnail, then that is the last story that I'm telling. I've got a few shorter ones, and then that's the long story. So, the first story, the first ghostly interaction that I had was actually in a boarding house that I rented when I was in college. And this was nothing scary, it was more annoying, but it was definitely a ghost. So I lived in a very old community where I went to college, and a couple blocks from campus was where this sorry, I'm getting all these notifications. So where I lived off campus was in a house that was maybe built anywhere between maybe 1880, 1920. It was like that 4-square style house, wood frame. And it had been sectioned off into apartments. And the upstairs apartment had been divided into a boarding house where we had like a shared kitchen and bathroom and like a shared living room area. And then it was like separate private rooms. Well, I had the old master bedroom, and this was the most annoying thing. There was a closet door there where it was like the original doors. You would push it closed, and then I never saw the door open. I will say that. Even when I was sitting with my back to it and I was like on Skype or something with somebody and I could see it in the background, I never saw this door open. But oftentimes I would go to the bathroom, or I would leave, or I would go to the kitchen, and when I came back, that door was open. Now, I did finally just put something in front of it so it would stop opening, but it wasn't just the door opening. It was when we would sit in that shared living room, every once in a while, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, we would hear somebody stomping up the stairs. Now, this wasn't weird because we didn't lock the door to our apartment. The door to our actual apartment was off a driveway, and so like you would go into the driveway and you would take this set of like side stairs up 2 or 3 flights, and it would get up to our apartment. Well, all of our friends knew that they could just come over all the time, and so when somebody would come up the stairs, we either thought it was them or our creepy landlord who tried to hang out with us all the time, who lived downstairs, or you know, somebody that we knew. So, like I said, every 2 or 3 days, or like 2 or 3 times a week, there would be somebody stomping up the stairs, and then we'd yell to them, or we'd think it was somebody in particular coming over, and we'd yell out their name, and we wouldn't hear anything. And or you'd like go jump up and see who's running up the stairs. There's nobody there. And this was not like the stairs creaking. It was like very obviously somebody coming up the stairs, and it sounded like heavy footsteps that went like, you know, however many number of stairs there were, like all the way up. It wasn't just one step or something like that. So I felt that that was pretty clear. The house is haunted. Now, obviously, whatever it was not, you know, it didn't have nefarious intentions. It was just annoying. The second time that I saw a ghost was actually, I think I actually was living in that boarding house. But it was in West Virginia. There's a park, and there's this overlook. And it's Fort Borman Park, if you guys want to look up what I'm talking about. It overlooks downtown, and I took a girl up there, and then I like chickened out. She was like, we were at the overlook, it was like obvious she wanted me to kiss her. Yeah, I kind of chickened out, and then then I was mad at myself for it, and I ended up being down there a few days later, or like a week later, with a friend of one of my roommates, and so we ended up driving up there, and I was explaining that to him. I was like, dude, like, Heather was up here with me. We were standing like right here, and I don't know what's wrong with me. And anyway, as I was describing that, I was standing with my back to the overlook. He was looking over my shoulder to the overlook. Behind him was a set of flags, and there's a cannon there. I don't know where the cannon's from, but it's old. And there's three flags. There's like the U.S., the West Virginia, and Wood County, maybe. I'm not sure. So there's the three flags there, and the weather was kind of like damp, and there was this fog or like mist that you would see, throughout the area on the roads and stuff. And I saw it like just behind us in the parking lot, and it went across where the flags were, and right behind where the cannon is. And as I was talking to him, I was looking at that mist just like very slowly like drifting across the parking lot. And just for like a split second, maybe it was a full second, as the light from the floodlight for the flag hit that mist, like right underneath the flagpole, clear as day, for like just a second, there was a Civil War soldier there. And I mean, I recognize that era of uniforms. I'm sure that's what it was. And I mean, it just solidified for just 1 second and then dissipated. So, and then he looked at me and he's like, "What did you see?" Because he could tell I saw something behind him. And I was like, I think I just saw a ghost. And so anyway, and he totally believed me. He was into that stuff, I guess, but I mean, it makes sense. Fort Borman was a fort during the Civil War. As far as I know, there weren't any battles there or any reason really for it to be haunted, but I don't know. I mean, still, I'm sure of what I saw. I mean, it was so clear. It was such a crisp image. It wasn't like, oh, I'm looking at fog and like seeing something in it. It's like, no, it was like bam, there for a second. Now, the one thing I will say about it is like, it wasn't in color, right? It was like the blackness of the night and the whiteness of the fog, illuminated by the floodlight. So it was like black and white and not in color. But other than that, it looked completely real. So here's the story, the main story that you've been waiting for. And this one is kind of long, but it involves my childhood. And the house that I grew up in, it was built in 1889 or 1890. And my grandparents bought it in 1954. My dad still lives there. And I don't know. I mean, I think some people think like all old houses are haunted. Well, I don't think that's true. But I just know that there's some stuff that's happened to me in this house that I think there's something there. In fact, I'm pretty sure I know there's something there. And this is a series of different things that happened. When I was little, my bed was in the living room. It actually wasn't until I was in college that I had a bedroom. My bed was always in the living room, and it was just kind of the way this house was set up. I know it was weird, but that's where there was room for it. So my crib had been there when I was a little kid, and then later on my bed was there. What I did not know until I was probably like 25, and I think my mom told me this, the location where they chose to put my bed as a child is the location where my grandmother died in her hospital bed. That's weird. Why would you put a child there? I don't know, man. My parents are weird. So anyway, I didn't know anything about that at the time, but I remember specifically one day, and I do not remember how old I was, and I can't remember if I was in my crib or if I was in, like, more of an adult bed, but I was a small child, and I remember The Price is Right was on TV, like the old 1970s console TV. It was next to my bed, and my mom was in the kitchen doing something. My mom, it must have been before I was in school. I mean, maybe I was 4 or 5. Anyway, my mom had made me. I still remember it. It was cut up hot dogs, like hot dogs sliced. I still remember that, and there was ketchup on this styrofoam plate, right? So I'd eaten the cut up hot dogs, and then I just had this styrofoam plate with like ketchup in it. And the reason I think I might have been in a crib is because I couldn't get out of the bed for some reason, so I think there might have been like the bars around it. And I was like yelling for mom to come in there. I wanted her to take my plate because I didn't feel like I could set like my styrofoam plate down on the bed and maybe get ketchup on the bed. So like several times I yelled for her and she wasn't coming in there, and so she would like yell something back about, oh, just wait or something, being like really impatient. And or well, I don't feel like I was being impatient. I feel like she should have been more attentive. Um, but anyway, so after she kind of yells at me from the kitchen, and after that, behind where my headboard was, there was a hand, like elbow down, and it like went like this, and it reached out of the wall from behind where my headboard was. But it was green. Like, it was green and it was veiny. And it was like, if you ever saw like the 1980s cartoon, The Toxic Avenger, it looked like his skin. And this thing just like reached down. And I did remember not being afraid of it. I was confused, I think, but I wasn't afraid. And I set my plate on its hand, and it just took it back. There wasn't a hole in this wall, nor was there anybody there that had green skin. It just came out of nowhere, and then it disappeared. And I remember specifically my mom coming in later and asking me where my plate was. And I was like, well, I gave it to the hand. And I guess as a child, I didn't think that was weird, but I was like, I gave it to the hand. And she's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And I remember her being mad at me about the plate because, like, she wanted the plate. She's like, what'd you do with it? Like, I gave it to the hand person. I don't know. So anyway, another thing from that house that I remember growing up is that across the street from us was a parking lot where houses used to be, but there was a bakery kind of like almost a block away, and the bakery had torn down a lot of the houses in the neighborhood and made them parking lots for the employees. So oftentimes in the afternoon or evening, my dad and I would go to the parking lot across the street and we would play something, whatever we were doing. And I remember at one point I got this really, really cool race car, and I don't know where this thing is, and if I ever find it one day, like I'm set for life. It was my absolute favorite toy I ever had, and I think somebody stole it, and that makes me really sad. I've never seen another one like it, but it was such a high quality, very nice race car, like remote control car. And of course, we got it cheap because we got it at a yard sale. It was amazing. And it was so fast. Like, so fast. Like, way faster than any other race car. Anyway, so I would go across the street and I would play with it. And my dad was there and he'd watch me and we would just, run it around the parking lot. Well, I remember quite a few different times that sometimes it would do weird stuff. Like, the car would, like, start driving when I wasn't touching the controls, or it would, turn the opposite way of what I told it to turn, or just basically do something that I didn't control it to do. And at this time, the bakery was there, and we were kind of near like where their trucks were. And my dad always told me, well, what's happening is we're getting interference from the CB radios from the trucks over there, and it's interfering with the radio signal for the car. And as a child, like, I guess that made sense to me, or was an acceptable answer. And I remember over a number of years that being a problem. But in the early 90s, I want to say it was 1994 or 1996, that bakery closed. It's now a strip club slash casino slash homeless shelter slash church. I don't know how that ended up happening, but and it used to have a gay bar in it. But yeah, I don't know what happened, but that's what it is now. So, at some point the CB answer just didn't make sense anymore. And now there's not a conclusion to that, but that adds into the next part of the story. When I was maybe 18, 19, 20, when I first graduated high school, I moved into the upstairs apartment of my dad's house. It's another old house that's divided up into apartments. And I lived up there, and I had an old desktop computer, which was a new desktop computer at the time. And it had the speakers that sat like individually on each side, right? And you turned them on independent of the computer. When I lived up there, fairly often, I would get some kind of like static or interference on those speakers. It didn't happen all the time, but maybe once a day, once every other day. Sometimes it was loud, sometimes it was very faint, but it sounded almost like Morse code, like, and I can still replicate it. It was like da 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 da. That was the pattern it would do. It'd be da 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 da, and then it would just like just buzz so fast. It was all like one thing. I don't know that that actually means anything in Morse code, but that's what it sounded like was Morse code. And it didn't seem to be like, me being near it or a metal object being near it or anything like that. It would just be, sometimes I'd be sitting there using the computer and it would just start making the Morse code sound. And I thought, well, maybe it's just the interference from the trucks across the street. But then it's like, no, the bakery's closed. There's no trucks across the street. And then, of course, now I think back to the race car and the interference that it had. Now, around the same time, I started driving, had my first car. It was a 1986 Lincoln Town Car. It was a hand-me-down from my dad. And during the time period where all this Morse code stuff was going on, I also started having radio interference on the radio of that car. And the first time that it did it, I was sitting in front of the house, and that makes sense. And it was this radio interference where I would hear that Morse code. But then I was also using that car to commute to Ohio University. And then it started doing it a few times when I was up there, and I was like, now this doesn't make any sense. This Morse code thing is now happening an hour away in a different state. And I was so confused. So, anyway, I was so confused. So now it's happening at different locations, with and without CB radio, and it's happening. So around this time, I'm also doing some genealogy research, okay? I go down to my dad's apartment. He lets me dig through old boxes and stuff he has in his storage rooms. And at that same time, my dad and his estranged wife, my stepmom, just happened to be talking on MSN Messenger. She lived, I think, in North Carolina. I don't think they ever officially got divorced, but they have a weird relationship. I don't know. They were talking on there, and during that time period that they were talking, my dad kind of chalked it all up to her being on a lot of pain medicine, but she told him that she was now psychic, which I don't know if I believe in that or not, but at the same time I was kind of learning like how to dress myself like a human, and not just, I didn't have my parents buy me clothes anymore, and I'd never been able to choose things. I didn't really know how to dress myself, and I was learning. And one of the things that I had found that I really liked was a black pea coat. But I mean, I was dead broke. There was no way I could buy a pea coat. I mean, they were like $100 for the cheapest one, and I also I didn't have a winter coat. Like, I just basically froze to death in the winter. So anyway, when my dad was talking to my stepmom one time, and she's now saying she's psychic, she starts talking to him about his dad, who died when he was 12, and how his dad felt like bad that he couldn't be there to meet me, and how he wanted me to have his peacoat because he couldn't be there for me. And, well, one thing, I mean, my stepmom wouldn't have any way of knowing about my dad's dad, or that my dad and I had been talking about fashion, or this peacoat that was in the back closet that was my grandfather's. And my dad swears he didn't tell my stepmom about any of this. Well, anyway, so after this happens, he tells me, he's like, I don't believe any of this, but this is what she said. I think it's just the pain medicine she's on. She's going crazy. But he tells me to go get the peacoat out of the closet, which has been in the closet since 1964. Okay? And I go and I take this coat upstairs to my apartment and I just hang it up. But I'm not wearing it, okay? Because I'm a little creeped out by the whole thing. All right? So I'm not wearing the coat, but I did go get it dry cleaned because it had like mildew around. I mean, I hung it in the closet for 40 years. It had like mildew around like the neck of it. So I went and I got it cleaned, and they fixed all of that. Now, this is a very heavy pea coat. It's not like one you get from American Eagle. This was actually issued by the Navy in 40 or 41. It was the one he wore during World War II. So I actually just hung it in my apartment. Like I said, it was a little weird about the whole situation. I wasn't sure. I was like, should I be wearing that? I mean, it's a little weird to wear an 80-year-old coat, but then again, I don't have a winter coat. Anyway. So I remember in particular one night that, and before I get into this, let me tell you about my grandfather. Someday I might make a video all about this, but I think my grandfather was like an early victim of police brutality. There's this whole story behind this. Like, I can make a several hour long video just about what happened. The fact of it is, nobody knows what happened. But July 22nd, 1964, he was killed by a police officer. The police officer changed his story a bunch of times. I think the final story was that he did not shoot him, that it was impossible for him to have shot him because he fired a warning shot up into the air, and my grandfather was down in the ravine below him. And I know there was ballistics testing done, but I've never been able to find the results of it. The family never found out what happened, and I mean, here it is like 40, 50 years later. We don't know. We just don't know. But that was when my dad was 12, and it was obviously very traumatic for, of course, my grandfather, who got shot, but my 12-year-old dad for losing his dad. Sorry, guys. I don't know if you can hear that. There's a bunch of children out in my breezeway. And so and then of course for my grandmother, who spent the rest of her life trying to clear his name. My grandmother was like this huge socialite in town, so it was this huge shameful thing for my grandfather to have been killed by the police, but yet nobody knew what happened. So, I can understand maybe why he would have like an unrested spirit where he might still be around. And the other thing is too, this activity with the Morse code and with all this stuff, it kicked up as I was living in that apartment and started to gut it basically. Like my dad was such a slumlord. He had rented the apartment, but he had like 30-year-old shag carpeting on the floor, which for the pad for that he used the shag carpeting that was there before. I mean, just ridiculous. Anyway, it was soaked in dog piss, and I took all of that out of there. I scraped the asbestos off the floor of the bathroom. I took the linoleum out of the kitchen. I was doing some like renovation and cleaning type stuff, and yeah, I've also heard that when you start doing stuff like that, it can stir things up. So, with all this stuff combined, I'm like this, like this is my grandfather that's in this house. There might be more spirits than that, but it's my grandfather that's here looking out for me. And so anyway, I remember specifically being in the bathroom one night in the upstairs apartment. The the pea coat is hanging on the door, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I remember saying something like, "Oh, I was talking to myself. I do that a lot." But I was talking to myself in the mirror, and said something like, "Oh, like I don't know if I should wear that because that's a little weird. I don't know if he'd want me to wear it." And just like right when I said that, the lights, cut off and then flickered back on for a second and then cut off and then went like completely back on. And I was like, okay. Because I basically said like I wasn't gonna wear it, and then I'm like that happened. I'm like okay, I'll wear it. It's cool. So that didn't happen again. And there was one other instance in that house. I don't remember if it was before or after that. But one night, I had a very long night at work, and I had to be up early in the morning. And I went back in the back room, and as soon as I laid down, the Morse code noise started. And it was much, much like louder and went on for a much longer time than it normally did. And so it starts out like do 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 do, and I'm like, oh no. I was like, I do not have time for this. And I'm like, I've got to go to sleep. And so I try to sleep, and it keeps doing it. And then it keeps doing it, but like in the background, I can hear sirens. But keep in mind, this is a house built in the 1880s. It doesn't have insulationing. It's got the original windows. I wasn't sure if the sirens were from the speakers or if it was from outside, because you would hear it. It's not muffled at all. Like you'd hear it just like you were right there. So I'm listening to this, and I'm trying to sleep, and I'm getting mad because I'm like, really, like, this is, what the hell's going on? This is so stupid. And I hear these sirens. I walk into the other room and confirm that, in fact, the sirens are coming from the speakers behind the Morse code. And they're getting louder and louder. Not the sirens themselves, they stay the same volume, but that Morse code. And I mean, it was like deafening volume. Like if you'd had the speakers turned up all the way. And anyway, I walk in there to the computer to try to do something to get the thing to shut up. And so you've got the Morse code super loud, you've got the sirens in the background, and then on top of the sirens, I hear clear as day a voice. And I cannot tell you, I remember this, but I cannot tell you if it was a male or female voice. I'm leaning a little more toward female, but clear as day, it says, "Stop so I can." I mean, I never heard the sirens, but I never heard a voice come over it, and it just says, "Stop so I can." And it just like didn't finish the sentence, but I'm like, "Stop so I can." And it was very loud when it yelled that. And so I remember I got mad because obviously I'm not thinking this is a ghost, right? Like I'm just like, what the is going on? Like I'm trying to go to bed, and then I realize that not only is the computer not on, the speakers are not on. Like you have to press a button and then this light comes on. The speakers aren't even on, and this is coming over them. And at this point, I'm pretty convinced that it's a ghost. So I literally just yell out in the living room. I'm like, look, I have to go to bed. I have to work early in the morning. Stop this. Like, and the second that I said that, the Morse code stopped. And it didn't do it for the rest of the night. I don't know, guys. I don't know what happened in that house, what's there. I don't necessarily feel that it's anything bad at all. I mean, it's either neutral or like some sort of good spirit or something. Maybe it is my grandfather. And another reason, not only the peacoat thing and it responding to me, not wearing the peacoat and all this other stuff. I mean, another reason that I have to just think maybe it is him is because of a story my dad told me from when my grandfather was in the Navy. He served on the USS Charles Osborne and another ship, but he was on the Osborne most of the time in the South Pacific during World War II. And he was a baker second class, and he was a good cook, but he didn't really want to do that. My great grandfather was a baker. That's probably where he learned the skills, but he didn't really want to do that. He wanted to be a radio operator. And the radio room apparently was like very close or next door to the bakery. And I don't know, he never got to officially do it. I don't know if he ever learned or if anybody ever taught him any of it, or maybe because he was a fan of doing that, maybe he knew Morse code. I don't know. Is he trying to communicate with me in some way? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. And this hasn't happened to me in years and years and years. Of course, I haven't been back to that house in almost 12 years now. But I don't know. Something happened there. There was something. So anyway, guys, I have the pea coat. I wear it still during the winter. It's the warmest coat I have. I do feel like my grandfather's looking out for me. And of course, I'm still trying to figure out what exactly happened to him. But anyway, those are my ghost stories. Let me know what you guys think. I'm not... I definitely will say I believe in ghosts, but I'm also not like... I don't like most of the ghost shows. I don't know that spirit boxes or EVPs or any of that stuff have any validity whatsoever. I kind of lean toward doubting it, but I do know that the experiences that I've had, so I do believe there's something there. I just don't know that anyone today understands it, and I don't know that we have any sort of equipment to necessarily pick up or interact with whatever it is. So, coming from a science background, that's the one thing is like we don't ever really discount ghosts and those sort of things, but part of being scientific is that you have to be able to not only capture it happening, which is infrequent with ghosts, but you also have to be able to replicate it. And that seems to be the part that we can't do. So it might be true, but it's one of those things that it's very difficult to prove with the scientific method, and if you can't do it that way, I can't really say. You can say, well, we can't detect it, but I think it's true, but there's no real validity to that. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think about what happened and what you think is going on. And happy Halloween. It's my favorite holiday. I love the spookiness and the darkness, and If you guys have any stories of your own, let me know. I'd like to hear them. And also, if you guys know where I can watch Hocus Pocus online, let me know. I'd like to watch it, like, for Halloween. And it's not on Netflix. I'm really disappointed. So stick around. I'm going to have a few more videos this week. And make sure you subscribe. And thanks for watching.